What would you do if your husband revealed every secret at once and made sure you couldn't escape the consequences? The wine glass trembled in my hand as I sat in my parents' living room, tears streaming down my carefully made-up face. He's just so cold, Mom. Daniel never talks to me anymore. He comes home late, locks himself in that stupid office, and acts like I don't exist. My mother, Patricia, reached over and squeezed my hand. Her wedding ring caught the lamplight as she shook her head in disgust. Honey, you deserve so much better. You've been nothing but supportive of his career, and this is how he repays you? I know, right? I sniffled, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. I try to make conversation at dinner, but he just grunts and scrolls through his phone. It's like I'm married to a stranger. My father looked up from his newspaper, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Elena, marriage takes work from both sides. Have you tried talking to him directly about these issues? Of course I have, Dad, I snapped, then immediately softened my tone. Sorry, I'm just so frustrated. Every time I bring up how I feel, he gets defensive and says I'm being dramatic. He makes me feel like I'm going crazy. The truth was, I hadn't tried talking to Daniel at all. Not really. Because talking would mean admitting what I'd been doing for the past 6 months, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not when everything was going so perfectly with Ryan at work. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Ryan. Missing you already. Can't wait for tomorrow's lunch meeting. I quickly flipped the phone face down, but not before my mother noticed my sudden smile. Who was that, sweetheart? Oh, just Sophie. She's checking on me. The lie rolled off my tongue so easily, it scared me sometimes. She's been such a good friend through all this. Patricia nodded approvingly. That's what you need right now. People who actually care about your feelings, unlike some people I could mention. My younger brother Jake rolled his eyes from his spot on the couch. Maybe Daniel's just stressed about work. You know how busy he's been with those new clients. Don't defend him, I said sharply. You don't see what goes on behind closed doors? The way he looks at me sometimes, like I'm some kind of burden. And he's always asking where I've been, who I've talked to. It's suffocating. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was describing my own behavior toward Daniel, not the other way around, but my family didn't need to know that. That sounds controlling, my sister Amy chimed in. Red flag behavior, Elena. You might want to think about counseling or what? I asked, though I knew where she was heading. Maybe some time apart, just to figure things out? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time I was more careful, tilting it so only I could see the screen. Another text from Ryan. Thinking about you in that blue dress from yesterday, you looked incredible. My cheeks flushed, and I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach. This was what I'd been missing with Daniel. The excitement, the passion, the feeling of being desired. Ryan made me feel alive again, like the woman I used to be before marriage and routine dulled everything to gray. Elena? My mother's voice snapped me back to reality. You're smiling again. What did Sophie say? She reminded me that I deserved to be happy. Another lie. But this one felt more like the truth than anything else I'd said all evening. Patricia squeezed my hand tighter. She's absolutely right. You're a beautiful, intelligent woman, and if Daniel can't see that, then maybe it's time to find someone who can. If only she knew how prophetic those words were. My phone rang suddenly, Daniel's name flashing on the screen. The room fell silent as everyone stared at me. Aren't you going to answer it? Amy asked. I shook my head. I'm not ready to talk to him right now. I need some space to think. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Daniel was persistent. I'd give him that. But I was done being the wife who jumped every time he called. Let it go to voicemail, Patricia advised. You don't owe him anything right now. The phone finally stopped ringing, and a few seconds later, the voicemail notification appeared. Part of me was curious about what he'd say, but a bigger part of me just didn't care anymore. Whatever Daniel had to say, it was probably just more of the same, asking where I was, when I'd be home, whether I'd eaten dinner. "You know what?" I said, standing up and smoothing down my dress. "I think I'm going to stay at Sophie's tonight. I need some time away from the house to clear my head." "Good idea," Patricia said, rising to hug me. "Take all the time you need, sweetheart. And remember, you have options. You don't have to stay in a marriage that makes you miserable." As I gathered my purse and keys, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For months, I'd been living a double life, sneaking around, making excuses, feeling guilty about the growing distance between Daniel and me. But sitting here, surrounded by my family's support and understanding, I realized that maybe I wasn't the problem after all. Maybe Daniel really had become the cold, distant husband I'd been describing. Maybe his recent behavior, the late nights, the locked office door, the way he watched me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, maybe all of that was proof that our marriage was already over. And if it was over anyway, then what I was doing with Ryan wasn't really cheating. It was just moving on. My phone buzzed one more time as I headed for the door. This time, it was a text from Daniel. "Elena, we need to talk. I'll be waiting up for you." I showed the message to my mother, who frowned deeply. "See what I mean?" I said. "Even when I'm trying to have some space, he's making demands. It's always about what he needs, what he wants." Patricia shook her head. "You don't have to go home tonight, Elena. Stay at Sophie's. Make him wait for once." As I drove toward Sophie's apartment, or at least that's where I told my family I was going, I felt lighter than I had in months. The guilt that had been eating away at me was finally starting to fade, replaced by something that felt almost like righteousness. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was just a woman trying to find happiness in a marriage that had already died. And if Daniel couldn't see that, if he couldn't understand why I needed something more, then that was his problem, not mine. My phone rang again as I pulled into the hotel parking lot where Ryan was waiting for me. This time, I didn't even look at the screen before hitting decline. Whatever Daniel wanted to talk about could wait until morning. The next morning, I crept into our house at 6 a.m., hoping Daniel would already be in the shower or making coffee. Instead, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, with dark circles under his eyes. "Good morning," he said quietly, not looking up from his coffee mug. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound casual as I hung my keys on the hook by the door. "You're up early." "I never went to bed." The words hung in the air between us like an accusation. I busied myself with making toast, avoiding his gaze. "Sophie's couch isn't very comfortable," I lied smoothly. "I barely slept either." "Elena." His voice was so soft I almost didn't hear him. "We really need to talk." "I know, but I'm running late for work. Can we do this tonight?" I grabbed my toast and headed toward the stairs, but his next words stopped me cold. "I called Sophie last night." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to turn around with what I hoped looked like confusion. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because I was worried about you. When you didn't come home, when you wouldn't answer your phone." He finally looked at me, and something in his eyes made my stomach clench. "She said you weren't there, Elena. She said she hadn't seen you all week." The toast suddenly tasted like cardboard in my mouth. I swallowed hard, my mind racing for an explanation. She must have been confused. Maybe she was half asleep when you called, or she was wide awake and very concerned. Daniel stood up slowly like an old man, though he was only 31. "She asked me if everything was okay between us. She said you'd been acting strange lately, canceling plans, being secretive." "That's ridiculous," I said, but my voice sounded shrill even to my own ears. She's been going through her own stuff lately. She's probably projecting." Daniel nodded slowly, like he was considering this. "Maybe you're right." Maybe I misunderstood. Relief flooded through me. Exactly. You know how Sophie gets when she's stressed. She probably forgot I was coming over, or... So where were you, Elena? The question was asked so quietly, so calmly, that it took me a moment to realize what he was really asking. Not where I told him I was going to be, where I actually was. I ended up driving around for a while. I needed to think. Then I got a hotel room because it was so late, and I didn't want to wake you up. Which hotel? The Hampton Inn on 5th Street. The one that's been closed for renovations since last month? My blood turned to ice. How did he know that? I'd driven past it a dozen times on my way to meet Ryan, but I'd never paid attention to whether it was actually open. No, not that one. The other Hampton Inn on Elm Street. There isn't a Hampton Inn on Elm Street, Elena. The way he said my name, like he was talking to a child who'd been caught in a lie, made anger flare in my chest. How dare he interrogate me like this? How dare he sit there, calm and collected, making me feel like a criminal? Fine, I snapped. Maybe it wasn't a Hampton Inn. Maybe it was a Holiday Inn or a Marriott or some other chain hotel. I'm sorry I don't have perfect recall of every detail when I'm upset and exhausted. Show me the receipt. What? The hotel receipt. Show it to me. I don't have it. I threw it away. Show me the charge on your credit card. My hands were shaking now, and I gripped the stair railing to steady myself. Daniel, what is this? Are you seriously going to stand there and interrogate me like I'm some kind of suspect? I'm your wife. Yes, he said quietly. You are, and I love you, which is why I need you to tell me the truth. The gentleness in his voice almost broke me. For a moment, I wanted to confess everything. The loneliness, the affair, the way I'd been lying to everyone, including myself. But then I thought about Ryan, about the way he made me feel, about the life I could have if I just held my ground a little longer. I am telling you the truth, I said firmly, and I don't appreciate being treated like a liar in my own home. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. What are you doing? I asked. Calling the Holiday Inn on Elm Street to see if they have a record of you checking in last night. There is no Holiday Inn on Elm Street. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. I know, he said simply. There's no Hampton Inn on Elm Street either, or Marriott, or any hotel, Elena. Elm Street is residential. Caught. Completely, utterly caught. But instead of confessing, I felt my defenses slam into place like armor. You know what? I don't have to stand here and take this. You want to play detective? Fine, but I'm not going to be treated like a criminal by my own husband. I started up the stairs, my heels clicking angrily on the hardwood. Elena, please, just talk to me. I turned around at the top of the stairs, looking down at him. He looked so small from up there, so defeated. Part of me wanted to run back down and throw my arms around him, to apologize for everything and try to fix what we'd broken. Instead, I said, maybe the problem isn't where I was last night, Daniel. Maybe the problem is that I felt like I couldn't come home to my own husband. I saw him flinch like I'd slapped him, and I felt a sick sense of satisfaction. Let him think about that. Let him wonder if this was somehow his fault. I slammed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, my heart pounding. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Good morning, beautiful. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. I smiled despite everything. At least someone appreciated me. At least someone made me feel like I was worth something. Another text came through, this one from Sophie. Hey, your husband called me last night looking for you. Everything okay? Call me. My smile faded. I'd have to call Sophie and explain, make sure our stories matched. It was getting complicated, keeping track of all the lies, but it would be worth it in the end. Through the bedroom door, I could hear Daniel moving around in the kitchen, probably getting ready for work. Good. I needed some space to think, to figure out how to handle this. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. I love you. Whatever's going on, we can work through it. Please don't shut me out. I stared at the message for a long time. 3 months ago, those words would have meant everything to me. Now they just felt like another burden, another complication in a situation that was already too complicated. I deleted the message without responding and started getting ready for work. I had a lunch meeting with Ryan to look forward to, and I wasn't going to let Daniel's suspicions ruin that for me. But as I stood in the shower, letting the hot water wash over me, I couldn't shake the image of Daniel sitting at that kitchen table, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. For just a moment, I wondered what I was doing, wondered if the excitement and passion I felt with Ryan was worth destroying the life I'd built with Daniel. Then I thought about the way Ryan looked at me, the way he made me laugh, the way he told me I was beautiful and brilliant and deserving of so much more than I was getting. Daniel had had his chance to make me feel that way. If he'd lost it, that wasn't my fault. I turned off the water and reached for my towel, already planning what I'd wear to lunch. Something that would remind Ryan why he'd fallen for me in the first place. Something that would make me forget, at least for a few hours, the look in my husband's eyes when he'd asked me to tell him the truth. Sophie's cafe was unusually quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. I found her at our usual corner table, stirring her latte with mechanical precision, her face troubled. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I know it was short notice." "Elena, we need to talk." Sophie's voice was flat, none of her usual warmth. "Your husband called me last night." I know. I should have warned you. Things have been really tense at home lately and—" "Where were you?" she interrupted. "Because you weren't at my place like you told him you'd be." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I ended up driving around instead. I needed space to think, and I didn't want to burden you with my problems. Sophie leaned back in her chair, studying my face. We'd been friends since college, and she knew me better than almost anyone. "Elena, what's going on? And don't give me some story about needing space. You've been acting weird for months." "Weird how?" "Canceling plans at the last minute, being secretive about your phone. That day I saw you downtown when you were supposed to be at work. You practically ran away from me." Sophie's voice was getting louder, and I glanced around nervously. "And now you're lying to your husband about where you're spending the night?" "I'm not lying about anything," I said, but the words sounded weak even to me. "Really?" Because Daniel sounded genuinely worried. He said you two have been having problems, but he seemed to think it was his fault. Like maybe he'd been working too much or not paying enough attention to you. Sophie leaned forward. "But that's not what this is about, is it?" My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Ryan. "Counting down the minutes until I see you again. Wear that perfume I like." I quickly flipped the phone over, but Sophie had already seen me smile. "Who was that?" "Work stuff." "Work stuff that makes you smile like that?" Sophie reached across the table and flipped my phone back over before I could stop her. The screen was still lit up, showing Ryan's message. The color drained from Sophie's face. "Elena, please tell me this isn't what I think it is." I snatched my phone back, my heart hammering. "It's not what you think." "Ryan Morrison? From your office? The married guy with 2 kids? Sophie, please. Oh my God." She sat back like I'd physically pushed her. "Elena, what are you doing?" The concern in her voice, the disappointment, made something snap inside me. I was so tired of being judged, of having to explain myself to everyone. "I'm trying to be happy," I said sharply. "Is that such a crime?" "You're married. To someone who barely notices I exist. When's the last time Daniel and I had a real conversation? When's the last time he told me I was beautiful, or took me somewhere nice, or made me feel like I mattered?" Sophie stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "So you're having an affair. I'm finding connection with someone who actually appreciates me." "Elena, listen to yourself. You're talking about destroying 2 marriages, breaking up a family. I'm not breaking up anything. Ryan and his wife have been having problems for years. He told me they're basically roommates at this point. And you believe that? The question hit me like a slap. Of course I believed it. Ryan wouldn't lie to me about something like that. Would he? Yes, I believe it. Because unlike some people, Ryan is honest with me about his feelings. Sophie shook her head slowly. This is insane, Elena. You need to end this before it destroys everything. Everything's already destroyed. The words came out louder than I'd intended, and several people at nearby tables turned to look. I lowered my voice. My marriage has been over for months. I'm just finally admitting it. Have you talked to Daniel about any of this? Have you tried counseling or... I shouldn't have to beg my own husband to pay attention to me. But you should communicate with him instead of running straight into another man's arms. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I thought you'd understand. I thought my best friend would want me to be happy. I do want you to be happy, but not like this. Elena, please, just think about what you're doing. Think about Daniel, think about Ryan's wife and kids. I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else for months. I grabbed my purse and jacket. And I've decided that I deserve better than spending the rest of my life in a loveless marriage. Elena, wait. But I was already walking away, my heels clicking angrily on the cafe's tile floor. Behind me, I could hear Sophie calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too harsh. I sat in my car for several minutes trying to calm down. My hands were shaking as I texted Ryan, "Can we move our meeting up? I need to see you." His response came back immediately. "Of course. Everything okay? Just need to be with someone who actually cares about me. On my way." 20 minutes later, I was in Ryan's arms in our usual hotel room, letting him kiss away the stress and confusion of the morning. This was what I needed. Someone who made me feel valued, desired, important. "You seem tense," Ryan murmured against my neck. "Bad day?" "Just some drama with a friend. She doesn't understand what we have." Most people wouldn't. His hands were in my hair, and I could feel myself relaxing for the first time all day. They don't understand that sometimes you have to take happiness where you find it. Exactly. I pulled back to look at him. "Ryan, I need to know. Are you serious about this? About us?" Something flickered in his eyes, too quick for me to identify. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" "Sophie made some comments about your wife, about your family situation. She seemed to think..." "Elena." He cupped my face in his hands. "My marriage has been dead for years. Lisa and I stay together for the kids, but there's nothing between us anymore. You have to believe that." I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. Because if Ryan was lying to me, if I was just another affair to him, then what was I doing? What was I destroying my life for? "I believe you," I whispered, and let him pull me back into his arms. Later, as I drove home, I tried to push away the doubts Sophie had planted in my mind. She didn't understand the situation. She didn't know how lonely I'd been, how disconnected Daniel and I had become. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw Daniel's car was already there. He was home early, which was unusual. Through the kitchen window, I could see him moving around, probably making dinner. For a moment, I sat in the car, watching him. He looked tired, older somehow than he had just that morning. When had the lines around his eyes gotten so deep? When had his shoulders started carrying that weight? My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "I'm sorry for pushing so hard earlier. I'm just worried about you. Can we talk tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Sophie meant well, but she didn't understand. No one understood, except Ryan. I took a deep breath and headed inside, already preparing the lies I'd need to tell about where I'd been, why I was late, what I'd been doing. But as I opened the front door, I found Daniel standing in the hallway, holding an envelope in his hands. "Elena," he said quietly, "we really need to talk." Something in his voice made my blood run cold. The envelope in his hands looked official, formal, legal. "What is that?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "It's from a private investigator," Daniel said, his voice steady and calm. "And I think you know what it contains." The world seemed to tilt sideways. How long had he known? How long had he been watching, waiting, gathering evidence while I thought I was being so careful? "Daniel, I can explain." "No," he said softly. "I don't think you can." And for the first time since this whole thing started, I realized that I might have made a terrible mistake. The envelope sat on our kitchen table like a bomb waiting to explode. Daniel and I faced each other across it, the distance between us feeling like miles instead of feet. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks. Daniel's voice was steady, but I could see his hands trembling slightly. "I hired the investigator after you lied about staying at Sophie's. I needed to know the truth." 3 weeks. I felt nauseous. "And you said nothing?" I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some explanation that didn't involve... He gestured at the envelope. "This." I wanted to deny it, to find some way to explain away whatever evidence he had. But the fight had gone out of me. I was tired of lying, tired of keeping track of all the stories I'd told. "Daniel, Ryan Morrison," he said quietly. "Married, 2 kids, works in your marketing department." Each word hit me like a physical blow. "How much do you know?" "Everything. The hotel receipts, the restaurant charges, the text messages." Daniel opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of photographs. "The investigator was very thorough." My hands shook as I looked at the photos. Me and Ryan entering the hotel, kissing in his car, walking hand in hand through the park downtown. Each image was a nail in the coffin of my marriage, undeniable proof of what I'd been doing. "I can explain," I said desperately. "Can you? Can you explain why my wife has been lying to me for months? Why she's been sleeping with another man while I've been trying to figure out what I did wrong?" The pain in his voice broke something inside me. For the first time in months, I saw the situation clearly, not through the lens of my own justifications and excuses, but through Daniel's eyes. The late nights he'd spent wondering where I was, the lies he'd had to swallow, the way I'd made him feel like he was losing his mind. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. It started as friendship and then..." "When?" he interrupted. "When did it start?" 6 months ago." He closed his eyes like I'd punched him. 6 months. Our anniversary dinner. You were texting someone all through dinner, and when I asked about it, you said it was work. I remembered that night. Ryan had been sending me funny memes, making me laugh while Daniel talked about his latest project. I'd been more interested in my phone than in my husband, and I'd justified it by telling myself that Daniel was boring, that he never had anything interesting to say. "It wasn't serious then," I said weakly. "When did it become serious?" I couldn't answer that. When was the first time I'd told Ryan I loved him? When was the first time I'd imagined leaving Daniel for him? The lines had blurred so gradually that I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment my marriage had ended. "Elena, I need you to understand something." Daniel's voice was calm, almost clinical. "I know about more than just the affair." "What do you mean?" He pulled out another set of documents. "I know about the joint account you've been draining to pay for hotel rooms. I know about the credit cards you opened in both our names. I know about the lies you've told your family, your friends, your coworkers." My stomach dropped. "Daniel, I know you've been telling people that I'm controlling, that I don't pay attention to you, that our marriage has been dead for years." His voice was getting harder now, losing that careful control. I know you've been painting me as the villain while you play the victim. I never meant. You told your mother I was emotionally abusive. You told Sophie I was having an affair. You told your coworkers that I was holding you back professionally. Each accusation hit me like a slap. You've been systematically destroying my reputation while you carried on with another man. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. Everything he was saying was true. I had been spreading those stories, planting those seeds of doubt about Daniel's character. It had made the lies easier to tell, made the affair easier to justify. I was confused, I said desperately. I was trying to make sense of my feelings, and You were covering your tracks. You were making sure that when people found out about the affair, they'd blame me instead of you. The accuracy of that statement took my breath away. That was exactly what I'd been doing, though I'd never admitted it to myself. Daniel, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... No. The finality in his voice stopped me cold. We can't. Why not? People get through affairs all the time. If you can forgive me. It's not about forgiveness, Elena. It's about trust. And you haven't just betrayed our marriage. You've betrayed everything we built together. He was right. And I knew it. But I wasn't ready to give up. Wasn't ready to face the consequences of what I'd done. What about Ryan? I asked, grasping for anything that might change his mind. He loves me. We're going to be together. Daniel's expression didn't change. Are you? Have you talked to him about leaving his wife? About building a life together? We've discussed it. Really? Because according to the investigator, Ryan's wife is pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not possible. She's 4 months along. They announced it to their families last week. I felt like I was drowning. He would have told me. Would he? Has he been honest with you about anything else in his life? I thought about all the times Ryan had canceled our plans at the last minute, claiming work emergencies, the way he never answered his phone after 6 p.m., the fact that I'd never been to his house, never met any of his friends, never been included in any part of his real life. He loves me, I whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Maybe he does, but not enough to leave his pregnant wife for you. The truth of it crashed over me like a wave. I'd thrown away my marriage, destroyed my relationships with friends and family, compromised my integrity and self-respect, all for a man who was never going to choose me. Daniel, please. I'll end it with Ryan. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. It's too late for that, Elena. It's not too late. It can't be. I've already filed for divorce. The words hung in the air between us, final, irreversible. When? This morning, after I got the final report from the investigator. I felt like the ground was falling away beneath my feet. Daniel, please don't do this. I love you. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I love you. Do you? Because the woman I married wouldn't have done any of this. The woman I married was honest and kind and would never have tried to destroy someone she claimed to love. He was right. The woman he'd married was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who lied and cheated and manipulated without thinking twice about it. I can change, I said desperately. I can be that person again. Maybe you can, but not with me. I can't trust you, Elena. And without trust, we don't have anything. He stood up, leaving the photographs and documents scattered across the table. I'll be staying at Mark's place for the next few weeks. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Daniel, wait! But he was already walking away, leaving me alone with the evidence of everything I'd destroyed. I sat there for a long time, staring at the photographs of my affair, thinking about the choice I'd made and where they'd led me. Finally, I picked up my phone and called Ryan. Hey, beautiful, he answered on the first ring. Miss me already? Is your wife pregnant? I asked, without preamble. The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Elena, I can explain. I hung up the phone and put my head in my hands. I'd lost everything. My husband, my marriage, my self-respect, my future. For a man who had been lying to me from the beginning. And the worst part was, I had no one to blame but myself. 3 months later, I sat in the Civic Center lobby, waiting for my name to be called for the final divorce hearing. Daniel sat across the room with his lawyer, looking composed and professional in his navy suit. He hadn't looked at me once since I'd arrived. My own lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Walsh, shuffled through papers beside me. Remember, Elena, given the evidence of the affair and the financial improprieties, we're not in a strong position to negotiate. The best we can hope for is that the judge doesn't award him everything. I nodded numbly. The past 3 months had been a nightmare of legal proceedings, depositions, and the slow dismantling of everything Daniel and I had built together. Word of the affair had spread through our social circle like wildfire, and most of our mutual friends had chosen sides. His side. Sophie had tried to maintain a friendship with both of us, but it was awkward and painful. She'd been polite but distant the few times we'd spoken, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes every time she looked at me. My family had been supportive at first, rallying around me and condemning Daniel for abandoning me in my time of need. But as more details came out, the financial deception, the lies I'd told about Daniel's behavior, the systematic way I'd tried to turn people against him, even their support had begun to waver. Ryan had ended things between us the day after Daniel filed for divorce. He'd sent a brief text saying he needed to focus on his family, and that was it. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of the promises he'd made or the future he'd painted for us. I'd been nothing more than a diversion to him, a temporary escape from his real life. Morrison versus Morrison, the bailiff called, and I felt my stomach clench. Despite everything, some part of me had been hoping Daniel would change his mind, that we could find a way to work things out. But as we filed into the courtroom, as the judge reviewed the evidence and the settlement agreement, I realized that this was really happening. My marriage was ending, and it was entirely my fault. The hearing itself was mercifully brief. Daniel's lawyer presented the evidence of my affair and financial deception with clinical precision. My lawyer made a half-hearted attempt to argue for a more equitable division of assets, but we all knew it was hopeless. When it was over, when the judge had signed the papers and made our divorce official, Daniel finally looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, no pain, just a kind of sad finality. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said quietly as we left the courtroom. "Daniel, wait." I caught his arm as he headed for the exit. "I know it's too late, but I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything." He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at my face. "I know you are, Elena, but sorry doesn't undo what happened. I know, I need you to know that I loved you. I do love you. I just lost sight of what was important." "You loved the idea of me," he said gently. "The security I provided, the life we'd built. But you didn't love me enough to be honest with me when you were unhappy. You didn't love me enough to work on our problems instead of running to someone else." The truth of his words cut deep, but I couldn't argue with them. "I hope you'll be happy," I said, meaning it. "I will be. And I hope you will too, once you figure out who you really want to be." He walked away then, and I watched him go, knowing it was the last time we'd ever speak as anything more than strangers. Outside the courthouse, I sat on a bench and called my mother. "How did it go, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It's over. The divorce is final." "I'm sorry, Elena. I know this isn't what you wanted." "Mom, I need to tell you something. About Daniel. About the things I said about our marriage." "Elena, No, please let me say this. I lied to you. To all of you. Daniel wasn't controlling or neglectful or any of the things I said he was. I made all of that up because I was having an affair and I needed to justify it to myself. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Mom? I'm here. Elena, why would you do that? Because it was easier than admitting that I was the problem, easier than taking responsibility for my choices. Oh, honey. Her voice was soft, sad. What happened to you? You weren't raised to behave this way. I don't know. I got lost somewhere along the way. I started believing my own lies, and by the time I realized what I was doing, it was too late. It's never too late to change, Elena, to become the person you're supposed to be. I hope you're right. After I hung up, I sat on that bench for a long time, watching people come and go from the courthouse. Some looked happy, couples getting married, families finalizing adoptions. Others looked as devastated as I felt, people ending marriages, fighting custody battles, dealing with the legal aftermath of broken relationships. I thought about the woman I'd been when Daniel and I first met. She'd been honest, kind, optimistic about the future. Somewhere along the way, that woman had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who lied without thinking, who manipulated people she claimed to love, who justified terrible behavior with elaborate self-deceptions. But maybe it wasn't too late to find her again. Maybe I could still become someone I could be proud of, even if it was too late to save my marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Thinking of you today. Call me if you need to talk. It was the first time she'd reached out in weeks. Maybe she was willing to give our friendship another chance if I was willing to be honest about who I'd become and who I wanted to be. I stood up, straightening my shoulders, and walked toward my car. The future stretched ahead of me, uncertain and lonely. But for the first time in months, I felt like I might be able to face it. I'd destroyed my marriage, damaged my relationships, and compromised my integrity. But I was still here, still breathing, still capable of change. It would have to be enough. 6 months after the divorce, I thought the worst was behind me. I was living in a small apartment across town, working at a new job after being quietly let go from my old one when the affair with Ryan became office gossip. I was seeing a therapist, trying to understand how I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Then Sophie called with news that changed everything. Elena, you need to see this, she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street? What's this about? Just, please, come now. I found Sophie sitting in the back corner of the cafe, her laptop open in front of her. She looked pale, almost sick. What's wrong? I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. Before I show you this, I need you to promise me you won't do anything stupid. Sophie, you're scaring me. What is it? She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a local news website, and the headline made my blood run cold. Local marketing executive arrested in embezzlement scheme. The photo showed Ryan being led away in handcuffs. Oh my God, I whispered. When did this happen? Yesterday. But Elena, that's not the worst part. Sophie clicked on another tab, showing a different article. Read this one. This headline was even worse. Embezzlement suspect used affair to cover financial crimes. My hands shook as I read the article. According to the investigation, Ryan had been stealing money from his company's accounts for over 2 years. He'd used his affair with me as cover, claiming he was working late on special projects when he was actually manipulating financial records. But the part that made me feel physically ill was buried in the middle of the article. Morrison allegedly told investigators that his affair partner, Elena Morrison, no relation, was aware of his activities and helped him access confidential client information through her position in the marketing department. That's not true, I said immediately. Sophie, I swear to you, I had no idea what he was doing. I never gave him any confidential information. I know, Sophie said quietly. But Elena, there's more. She clicked to another article, this one from a legal blog. The Morrison Case, How One Man's Lies Destroyed Multiple Lives. This article went into more detail about Ryan's deception. He'd been having affairs for years, using different women to provide alibis and access to information. His wife wasn't just pregnant. She was pregnant with their fourth child, and she'd had no idea about any of his affairs until the FBI showed up at their door. He used me, I whispered. He used all of you. There were 3 other women, Elena. All of them thought they were his only affair. All of them thought he was going to leave his wife. I felt like I was going to be sick. The FBI wants to talk to me, don't they? Sophie nodded. They called me looking for you. I gave them your number. As if on cue, my phone rang. Unknown number. Elena Morrison? The voice was crisp, professional. Yes? This is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. We need to speak with you about Ryan Morrison and his alleged financial crimes. Can you come in for an interview this afternoon? The next few hours were a blur of questions, lawyers, and the slow realization of how completely I'd been manipulated. The FBI agents were professional but thorough, asking about every interaction I'd had with Ryan, every piece of information I might have shared, every detail of our relationship. It became clear that Ryan had targeted me specifically because of my access to client information and my unhappy marriage. He'd researched Daniel and me before making his first move, knowing exactly what to say to make me feel special and desired. Did you ever give Mr. Morrison access to client files or confidential company information? Agent Chen asked. No, never. I would never do that. Did he ever ask you about specific clients or projects? I thought back to our conversations and my heart sank. He would ask about my work sometimes, show interest in what I was doing. I thought he was just being supportive. What kind of questions did he ask? About client budgets, timelines, contact information. But I thought he was just making conversation. I never gave him actual files or passwords or anything like that. But you did share information verbally? The truth hit me like a physical blow. Oh, God. Yes, I told him things. Client names, project details, budget ranges. I thought I was just venting about work stress. Agent Chen made notes. We'll need a complete list of everything you remember sharing with him. After the interview, I sat in my car in the FBI parking lot, trying to process what had happened. I hadn't just destroyed my marriage for a man who didn't love me. I'd been systematically manipulated and used by a criminal who had targeted me specifically for what I could provide him. Every conversation we'd had, every romantic gesture, every promise about our future together, it had all been calculated, designed to keep me compliant and useful. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about your boyfriend. Guess you really know how to pick them. Mark. Daniel's best friend, who I'd always disliked because he saw through my act from the beginning. The text was cruel, but I couldn't even be angry about it. He was right. Another text, this one from my mother. Elena, I saw the news. Are you okay? Do you need a lawyer? And then, surprisingly, one from Daniel. Elena, I heard about the FBI investigation. If you need legal advice, my attorney might be able to recommend someone. Despite everything, I don't want to see you get railroaded by a federal prosecutor. I stared at that last message for a long time. Even after everything I'd put him through, Daniel was still trying to protect me. The man I'd betrayed, lied about, and tried to turn everyone against was offering to help me in my darkest hour. I called him. Elena? He answered on the first ring. Daniel, thank you for the text. I don't deserve your help. Nobody deserves to be used the way Ryan used you. You know about that? The FBI contacted me as part of their investigation. They wanted to know if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior, any signs that you might have been sharing information. And what did you tell them? The truth. That you're not a criminal, Elena. You're someone who made bad choices, but you're not a criminal. I started crying then, sitting in that FBI parking lot, overwhelmed by the kindness of the man I'd wronged so deeply. Daniel, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you, to us. I know you do. And Elena? I forgive you. Why? Because holding on to anger was destroying me, and because I can see now that Ryan manipulated you just as much as you manipulated me. We were all victims of his lies, in different ways. After we hung up, I sat in my car for another hour, thinking about the chain of deception that had led to this moment. Ryan had lied to me, I'd lied to Daniel, and I'd lied to myself most of all. But it was over now. The truth was out, all of it, and there was nowhere left to hide. 3 months later, Ryan was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. I was cleared of any criminal wrongdoing, though my career in marketing was effectively over. The other women he'd manipulated were also cleared, and we'd formed an unlikely support group, helping each other rebuild our lives. Daniel had started dating someone new, a teacher named Lisa, who seemed to make him genuinely happy. I'd seen them together at the grocery store once, and the way he looked at her reminded me of how he used to look at me, back when I was someone worth looking at that way. I was working as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, a job that paid 1/3 of what I used to make, but gave me something I'd lost along the way: peace. The animals didn't care about my past mistakes, and my coworkers only knew the person I was trying to become, not the person I'd been. Sophie and I were slowly rebuilding our friendship, though it would never be quite the same. Trust, once broken, was hard to repair completely. But I was learning to live with the consequences of my choices, to find meaning in the small kindnesses I could offer others, to build a life based on honesty instead of deception. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was real, and after years of living in a web of lies, reality, however painful, felt like a gift. The wedding video Daniel had mentioned in his final text to me, the one that exposed everything, turned out to be metaphorical. There was no actual video, just the slow revelation of truth that had destroyed the illusion of our perfect marriage. But in a way, that made it even more powerful. The truth didn't need dramatic reveals or public confrontations. It just was, patient and persistent, waiting to be acknowledged. And in the end, acknowledging it, all of it, had set us both free. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.